Welcome to the Moburst VIP webinar series. My name is Mike Kresch. I am the Vice President of Strategy here at Moburst. And the topic of today's discussion is titled Marketing Forward, What Executives See Coming Next. And let me give you guys some context to the discussion. The mission of the strategy division at Moburst is to provide data and insights that support the growth process. So two key points along those lines as we think about webinars. Number one, I think we would be remiss if we didn't pay a significant amount of attention this year when we talk to our clients, our friends, our vendors, everybody who's attending here today. We need to be paying more attention to the future and what it looks like so we put everyone in a position to succeed. The second key point to make is that when we were strategizing internally about how to provide more value for the people that attend these webinars, our marketing director, Vera Aviv, made a really good point, and that is that we've got this tremendous army of talent within our client base. So what you will see today, we have asked two of our esteemed clients to join us, and I will ask them to introduce themselves in just a second. So with that, again, really appreciate your being here today. If you have any questions, would like to ask you to leave them in the chat, and I will, and you can direct them at specific individuals or the group in general, and I will make sure that they're answered. So let's get started. I'd like to ask each of the panels. We'll start with you, Clayton. Can you tell everyone who you are, what you do, who you work for, all the good stuff?
Sure, and thanks for having me today, Gilad and Mike. I think I've been with you guys for going on 3 years, and so we, have a good experience here. I am the senior executive advisor and industry spokesman for Truecaller. I've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. The firm's been around for since 2009. We have 500 million active users, monthly active users on a global basis, just to give you an idea of the scale of the business. And we rely heavily on Moburst for our performance marketing as well as our PR, and have a good relationship there. And I do have some perspectives that I'm happy to share with your audience. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Jason?
Hey everyone, my name is Jason Chung. I currently am the Senior Mobile Growth Manager for Microsoft, specifically for Microsoft Copilot. And I actually recently added a new remit to my scope, which is M365 Copilot. So really excited to be leading all of mobile growth efforts. I've been working with Moburst for I think a little over 3 years now. I actually worked with them when I was at Snapchat, and then they were doing such great work that I decided to bring them over to Microsoft Copilot when I made that transition. So specifically with Moburst, I do a lot of App Store optimization, and Moburst has been fantastic at not only providing, really great recommendations, but also doing just really in-depth analysis on a weekly basis. So really excited to be here and chat through, what I've been doing, but also kind of providing more value on, what Moburst has been doing for us as well.
Amazing. All right, just for the audiences, just so you know, no payment was made for those guys. Really appreciate the nice words from both of you, but
Was that an option, Mike?
sorry. Really appreciate it, but not necessary. Thank you. And finally, I would like to have, for those people that might not or don't have the luxury of that I do of working with Gilad every week, have Gilad introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Really amazing. Thank you, both Clayton and Jason. My name is Gilad. I'm the CEO and founder of Moburst, and very happy to be here today and trying to be a resource.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. Jason, I'm going to start the first question with you. So I think one of the things that we see is, and we kind of touched on this before, just so everyone knows before we jumped on the webinar, in this world that's really being disrupted right now, a lot of times we see the marketing world kind of rushing into things, and whether that's to try to stay ahead of the curve with something or whether it's they feel behind. So Jason, question for you. Do you see anything that is maybe being overhyped at this point? And then on the flip side, what do you think that high-performing marketing teams are doing? So I guess that's two parts. One, what's kind of being overhyped right now amidst the chaos? And two, what are the high-performing people doing?
Yeah, great question. So given that I, work in AI, Microsoft Copilot, and obviously AI is, fundamentally kind of changing the way we're approaching any kind of work, really. I joined Microsoft back this past September, so it's only been maybe like 7, 8 months. But even from within the company itself, I can tell you that where I was 7, 8 months ago and now, the company's completely shifted. Our KPIs, the way we operate, the way we are, executing a lot of our goals, just things have changed so much because AI has accelerated just how fast we can achieve a lot of these goals in terms of productivity. But I do want to caveat, and this is a really good segue because I do think that even though I work in the AI space, AI is still kind of overhyped almost as this magical replacement that it can potentially replace all of this work that we're doing right now. And maybe, in the next 6 to 12 months or even in a couple of years, maybe that's a possibility. But at least right now, we still need that human touch. There are a lot of times when, people utilize, Gen AI to generate, for example, creative assets for Page UA or for App Store. However, there's still that sentiment around, quote unquote, what you call AI slop. And that's because, you can still tell by the generated content from AI that it is AI. And I think a lot of people are a little, so put off by that. So I think, a lot of teams are chasing AI generated content at volume, but that doesn't automatically mean that more content in the market means, better marketing. I think in the next 24 months, I think the fundamental shift that we're going to be seeing with a lot of great marketing teams is that they'll be utilizing AI to essentially personalize, scale, learn faster, and move faster, and kind of, get that learning in a little bit faster way, but not necessarily replace what people are doing at scale currently. So I think the most important thing that we'll see is this fundamental shift in how we receive feedback. So not only, through receiving feedback loops, we're going to be able to act faster on, okay, what is this personalization journey of users doing? But not only that, we can actually move faster to apply those learnings, in real time. So that, this delay that used to exist by, working with, different teams with a lot of human errors, that's going to be essentially removed by AI, allowing us to shift faster. So in the next 24 months, I do think that, for example, we're going to see a shift in, in the App Store world where, we currently have, custom product pages, we want to land users, depending on what journey they're in. I think eventually we'll see where not only will App Store and Google Play Store be this, AI landscape of kind of like showing users exactly what they need, but also from a customization standpoint, I think we'll be able to, upload certain set of, targeting and screenshots and creatives that align, and then the AI models will essentially match. So I really do see and think that we're going to see much more in-depth personalization that we just have never seen before in the next 24 months.
Amazing. Personalization. So any commentary from Clayton, Gilad on that front? Really good answer, by the way.
So I would add, we are also in the AI business, different than Copilot. But number one, we have AI being weaponized against global consumers, and we're using AI to fight AI. So we're in the AI game as well. I think that where we are in the hype cycle with regard to marketing is interesting. I can't tell you how many emails I get every day, which basically say you should abandon everything you're doing and you should only worry about indexing and generative AI. Right. And we've seen this movie before. I remember a gentleman named Mark Zuckerberg telling us that we would be conducting this call with avatars that we had created in the metaverse, and there was a little bit of hype cycle there as well. So I think, we want to obviously future proof our marketing strategy, and we're working with Moburst to do that. We also don't want to forget our legacy and our heritage and everything that got us to 500 million users. And so the trick is to how do you incrementally blend in evolving technology and make sure that you're not missing the boat without believing that it's a silver bullet. And I agree with Jason that I think what I'm really looking forward to is near real-time insights because of the agility that we can gain by using AI to test messages, to test segments, to test personalization, hyper-personalization, all of those things. And if I get those near real-time insights because AI can analyze it so quickly for me, then we can adjust and be much more agile. And I think that that's where the market is going. But to believe that we should suddenly abandon the tried and true, and we could talk a little bit more later about what a combined arms offensive looks like, in terms of, all of the blend and mix of tools that you should bring. AI is one of them, and certainly it will be, yeah, you're right. In 24 months, app stores will look very different, right? You'll have these suggestion and recommendation engines that look like you should watch this movie too on Netflix, look like, like amateur hour. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also trying to balance what's working. I don't want to abandon what's working right now.
Amazing. So
Yeah, if I
Gilad,
can actually,
oh, no, go ahead.
if I can
Sorry,
add
go
one
ahead.
more thought to that,
Please.
I think I completely agree with what Clayton said. I think one funny analogy that I actually saw recently on like a subreddit was that someone said that their company essentially got rid of 5 AI subscriptions and rehired 2 mid-level engineers because it ended up being cheaper. So I
Yeah.
think it kind of goes to the point of like, yes, AI is really efficient. It might be it might be a really good, great tool. One of the tools, as Clayton said, that drive productivity. But, to everyone's point here, it's not something that is quite there for us to completely replace to use as like a marketing strategy completely.
Amazing. Gilad, I heard the word test referred to a few times over the last 5 minutes, but I see that. Look at that smile. That's like music to your ears. How does that come into play? Because that's the essence of what performance marketing is. How is testing in general going to be changing over the next, say, couple of years in broad strokes?
Wow, I think that you're asking like the $100 million question type of a thing, because I feel like every single one of the AI tools out there can allow you to do so much more. But then the question is, what will actually perform? What has a good hypothesis behind it that will actually have a very high likelihood of succeeding? We are now developing something that we call Predict, that basically we're testing it from 2 different angles. One of them is like 100 synthetic audiences that are trying to create who are the personas that you're going after. And then those personas will see the new asset and say if they like it or dislike it and give it a score. And based on that, to see if it works or it doesn't work on one end. And on the other end, we are trying to create it based on the model that Meta launched that actually analyzes brain waves and seeing what type of places in your brain actually getting triggered on and off based on seeing different aspects, and then knowing how to change and revise a piece of content to be able to get it to the best performance that you can on the first few seconds before the user scrolls to the next ad on things like nature. So I think that there's going to be a radical change on how you're producing content, how you're testing content, how you're creating new pieces of images, videos, every single type of asset. What will be the way to actually get the feedback loop? I think that right now, every single new asset that you're getting, okay, we need to test it in front of users. We like it. It was brand approved. Now let's put money behind it. I think that you won't going to necessarily even need to put money behind it, because you have prediction models that help you to get a higher percentages of this has a 95% success rate compared to other things that you've done before and things like nature. So I love testing, as a marketeer. Every single day we test thousands of different things. The goal is to get a really fast feedback loop to feedback to see this is working, double down. It doesn't work, kill it and move to the next one. So it's a very, very interesting era. And with the cost of producing content becoming so much cheaper because AI can create you so much content in a click of a button, then the big question is what have a higher conversion? What is actually the good content that you want to produce and not just the creation of the content?
Amazing. So content is something I think we definitely need to discuss. Before we get there, though, Clayton, I have a question for you. As you talked about Truecaller, I think one of the important pieces of that is that it's a global company, and you have users all over the world. And the user experience and the marketing approach to different geos is nuanced. How do you see that being impacted over in the future? In other words, how is all this disruption changing things globally? Is there a universal approach to this, or does each individual market have to be catered to differently?
There, through our history, it's been kind of a monolithic message, right? Make communication safer, right, and more efficient. And we do that by what started out 15 years ago, 16 years ago as, caller ID and spam blocking. So that monolithic message carried us to hundreds of millions of users. That's changing now. Right. So first of all, the services we provide are moving more to fraud prevention, for example, communications management. And so not only do we need to make sure that we are geographically and culturally, very localized, right? But we need to do that without being fragmented. And I think that so the messaging, there can be core messages, but then those messages have to be targeted in a very colloquial fashion to specific cultures around the world. And so I think that that's one way it's changing. I think also something we've discovered, and Mike, you and I have been on this journey together, is that different demographics and segments use our app differently and for different reasons. And so our ability to connect with them in PR and in marketing and in the app stores and everything we do, I want to connect with seniors who have a different problem than I do in our sandwich generation because I want to protect my kids and my parents, than professionals who have different reasons because they don't want to miss any calls, right? And so the messages vary by segment and it can sound fragmented, but it doesn't have to be if you have the right partner and the right approach to make sure that there is an overarching value proposition, but recognize different life stages in different geographies are going to use the app and messages are going to resonate with them differently. And I think it's a little bit different than personalization, but I think it's increasingly manageable with some of the technology we have.
Jason, Gilad, any thoughts on that topic?
I think it's very interesting that, even though Clayton's industry, in terms of, being Truecaller versus Microsoft Copilot, very two different industries, I think the marketing strategy is still very similar. So, I agree completely with Clayton about the localization aspect. I think that's something that's huge for us because especially on the App Store is where the App Store is essentially where you see the highest intent users, right? So they're dropping into the App Store, they're about to download something, and let's say we have the same messaging across from the US, globally, right, to other countries. The product feature or the most utilized feature by market varies greatly. So, for example, US users might find more productivity in utilizing Copilot for, planning your meals, for example. However, maybe in Germany, that's not the case. Maybe people find more usability with Copilot when they're planning their financial goals. So, depending on where the user lives, I think the localization aspect is huge because when we localize our content for each market, then we really genuinely show the users that, hey, like we care about what matters to you. Whereas, if we just have a very universal messaging across, then we kind of show the users that, hey, like regardless of what you like or not, this is what you get. So to Clayton's point, I think whether, AI is changing the landscape of, how we market to our users, that localization slash personalization aspect will continue to live on. So I think, what Clayton says is completely right that, no matter what is happening in the world right now, users still want to see that personalized content because they want to be able to relate, right? So I think that is something that we still need to constantly, invest heavily in so we make sure to localize all of our content across all of our geos. So yeah, Clayton, great point there.
Yeah, completely agree. The right message to the right user at the right time. So many products out there have so many unique selling propositions. You just want to show the person the right thing that they're looking for. And it could be like the same app or the same kind of company can have 5 different unique things that they can do for their users. But I, as a user, only care about one specific thing that I'm searching for. Show me the right message at the right time, and you'll convert me. It's that easy, and it's still obviously the same company. It's still the same value that you're kind of showing as what the company comes to solve, but very different kind of use cases to that value.
Amazing. So I think no matter what technology does, in essence, we cannot get away from speaking to, I think that the universal messages, we cannot get away from customized messaging, catering to specific niches and focusing in on targeted personas.
Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. Okay. All right. So let's now move into the content phase because I think this is a really interesting topic, Jason. You brought it up, so I'll start with you. Um, Given this plethora of AI-driven content that's coming up, and let's withhold judgment on good, bad, or what is it, but what are winning brands going to do with this surge of AI-infused content? What are the top? What does success look like in that space?
I think in this crazy world of, AI generated content that we live in, I think the teams and the company that will truly succeed the most is generating content that is relevant to the users, right? I think, with similar to, the dot-com boom, for example, obviously I was a little bit on the younger side when the dot-com boom happened, but from what I read about, from what I understand, there were, millions or billions of websites that, essentially came about, when the dot-com boom happened. So there were all different kinds of use cases, all different kind of websites. And, I can confidently say that maybe like 90+% of those websites are non-existent now. And I think the point that I try to make is there are so many wide use cases with AI currently right now that it's really hard for us to kind of like pinpoint exactly what users are looking for and users want to use it for. So I think with this AI generated content driven landscape that we live in, the best teams will generate AI content that is the most relevant to the users. And I know I touched on it earlier where we cannot just simply fully rely on AI content to be the one to drive all of our marketing and paid user acquisition. Because even if you go on, Instagram, TikTok, social media, and you come across an ad that clearly looks like AI, if you look at all the comments, people are saying AI slop, this is AI, I don't like it. So I think the right balance right now is to not inundate users with pure AI generated content, but have a good mix of it. So one good example that I want to, share is given that, vibe coding is becoming such a huge thing, Claude Code, all these major coding tools that make, virtually anyone with no technical experience to be able to code whatever they want. So right now internally at our company, we are trying to create some automated tools to make scaling content a lot easier. And that's to say that we're not actually utilizing AI fully to generate, content all the way to scaling, but we're actually utilizing, human designers, right? So we're partnering up with the design team and the production team to essentially build content library and tools that the AI can pull from. So even now that we still need that human element and human touch to really convince users that, hey, this is an app for humans, made by humans, that you can actually, really improve your life. So I think AI already being a little bit of a scary world for a lot of consumers right now, it's not really helpful for us to push AI content to, kind of like grab these users to use our app, right? So long-winded, answer to kind of like, put it into a TLDR format. In such an AI-driven content world, I think the trust truly comes from, how specific we are, how useful we are being with the content. So I think the winning team will truly, the winning company will truly be that company that can specifically understand the user's needs and also utilizing the AI generated content to kind of, entice the users. And of course, not fully AI generated, but, partnering with AI to generate content that humans can actually look and trust. I think that's the biggest thing that, we're going to see right now.
I completely agree with all of that. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that particularly we're in this limbo right now of some be transparent about it. Tell people this is an AI generated campaign, right? I know that's controversial, but otherwise they're out there looking at it and people are saying this is BS. Like, do they think they're fooling me? Don't try to masquerade BS as something that was human in the loop, right? And so I think that's honesty. It goes so far in building a brand, right? And having that integrity. I think people are okay if they say this is going to be an AI generated series, or this is, I think we're at a place right now where that actually will earn you credibility. And then you have to flank it with real things like webinars or me showing up on a TV program because I'm not AI. I probably hallucinate less, but I'm not. And so you have to blend in the campaign types and be very honest. And I think even before you start generating the content, the other word that jumps to mind for me is differentiation, right? Before you build a campaign, whether it's designed by humans or it's designed by machines, you better have something that differentiates you because it's getting increasingly crowded out there with everybody vibe coding or generating something they believe solves a problem. And we're going to have to cut through a lot more noise because you just have to have a couple of interns and a beer and pizza budget, and they're going to spin up an application or a service or something, and you're going to find yourself, competing against them. And so I think that differentiation is the job of the brand to give it to marketers like Moburst to say, now help me figure out what I'm going to do with this.
Yeah, exactly, Clayton. I mean, I agree so much. Like, to your point, I think AI can be the tool to generate different variations of the content that we create. But I think, to your point, humans, people like us still need to be the one to actually, decide whether this is distinct, is it on brand, is it emotionally resonant, and is it actually useful, right? Because if we solely rely on AI to do all of that, then I think the disconnect will be very, very evident in our consumer base. Yeah.
Yeah, spot on. I have to say that Moburst seen an increase around 80% year over year on the growth that we are seeing. And it's only because I feel like you have so many more entrepreneurs out there that managed to build something and let's test it out. Let's see how it goes. You have so many more entrepreneurs, so much more capital that being invested into, hey, this is an app that does this and that. It used to take 2 years to build. Now, hey, you know what? In 2 months or 3 months, you can build a decent product. And it's something that you used to need to have like a team that's going to be 15x bigger than that. And the time to market is shrinking. So the amount of noise, exactly as Clayton mentioned, is going to be over the roof. And then fighting for that attention is going to be exactly how do we get someone that's going to be excited about the service when you are seeing every single day, hey, I'm doing this and you can do that and now you can build that. Okay, it's exhausting. Like to actually stay top of mind for a brand, you need to be authentic and you need to kind of show that, you know what, you also need to show that you're vulnerable, that sometimes you made a mistake and you need to take ownership of that mistake to show, hey, you know what, we're not robotic. We are human. We are actually understand kind of how the scenery looks like. You see massive brands that are making mistakes that cost them sometimes millions, sometimes it's billions of dollars based on fiascos that I think Mike just wrote about them a few pieces in a very big publication. The barrel incident and like lots of others that are kind of making a big change to their brand and saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, we made a mistake here. We need to go back and actually fix it. So I think that owning your brand is really, really important.
Which leads to an interesting philosophical question, because I think what I'm hearing in a recurring way is that there's going to be an awful lot of mediocre product and content put out there. So, does that mean the world is going to become a more difficult place for consumers? Meaning, do you think that consumers are going to get trapped with a lot of mediocre innovation out there? And is that not to get overly philosophical, but is that kind of a danger in some respects?
So, in my opinion, yes, initially, right? I think that initially, when we are in a little bit of this limbo that I described, where we're starting to see, now we have this huge onslaught of, everybody's a coder, everybody can get out there and become an influencer, right? These concepts. And I think that consumers are going to have to sift through that to determine what is actually going to be a durable brand. Okay, you're here today, but is it important to me that you're here tomorrow, right? And so I think that they're going to have to learn to be more cautious because they'll get burned a few times. I do think though that AI on its own is getting people to be justifiably suspicious, right? I can't tell you how many times a day, and I'm sure all of us have this. Is this real? I get it from my folks. I get it from my kids, right? It's like, is this really happening? Is it fake news? Is it a real product? Is it a real problem? Is Jupiter really that big? You get all these things that come in. So I think there's already some skepticism, Mike, that will help serve the consumers. But people get defrauded, right? That's part of what we're trying to prevent. Don't get defrauded, and
Right.
people will make purchases that they regret for goods or services. And as long as they're able to communicate that, then they'll be able to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think to Clayton's point, I definitely agree with everything he said. So during my most recent trip to our HQ in Redmond, I actually got to sit down with some of our MAI execs during a dinner, and I actually had a very insightful conversation. I asked one of the leads, one of the user researchers who is leading Microsoft Copilot's user research. I asked her, what do you see happening and in the next 5 years, how AI is going to be changing the way people behave? And she was actually very optimistic with this answer. She was saying that, because she got a sneak peek of like future, AI models, from, Claude, OpenAI. So she has a little bit of like, industry knowledge that, we might not have. And she was saying how AI is becoming increasingly good at guessing and expecting the next behavior and the next five behaviors that people are going to want to do. So the point is here, I'm trying to say is AI is going to eventually know what we want even before we even realize it. So when you kind of translate that into the consumer world, I think that kind of is like a double-edged sword, right? So imagine a world where you wake up, you open your phone, or I mean, maybe you're wearing, contact lenses with, UI in front of you, like, however future is going to be, and it perfectly knows exactly what you need, what you want, even if you might not need it, but it will push it out to you because you're interested in it and it knows you want it. So I think right now, in a landscape where there's just so much AI kind of just being pushed throughout right now, I think it's going to be better. We might maybe see less, kind of, slop in the market, but I think it's going to be so targeted and kind of what we were talking about this entire time, very personalized, that it will be harder for, I think, consumers to navigate. But on the other side, I think what Microsoft is actually trying to do, in this space is what we call humanist AI. So we know that AI is something that it can drive, insane efficiency, provide insane amount of productivity, but at the same time, it has this level of personalization that we have never seen before. So it will probably have a negative effect on consumers, right? That we might kind of like spend too much, we might overconsume because AI is matching things that we might need. But to mitigate that, that's why we're kind of announcing or we're focusing so much on humanist AI to kind of have a human level of, thinking, human level of respect so that, AI doesn't just what, in a corporate, joking sense, provide value to the shareholders, but not just that, but actually also provide value to the users that are using it. So in a long-winded answer, in a short way, I think, the landscape will be changing to the point where it will be harder for us to say no to some of the products that, it surfaces to us just because it's so good at personalizing. But I am hoping that, all of these companies that are currently, racing towards, AI and even eventually AGI, that they will actually consider these humanist elements, in markets so that, they don't suddenly inundate users with unnecessary products or things that they, might want but not necessarily need. So I think it will be a very tricky but also interesting landscape that we're going to see unfold in the next few years.
Do you mind really quickly, just in case some of our audience doesn't know, can you define AGI and explain what
Yeah,
that?
so what's interesting is, I actually at the very dinner table, I asked one of our execs, how do people define AGI? So if we were to go by a very contractual term, if you look at OpenAI's contract, with all these different companies, I think they define AGI as like a product or a tool that can generate, like billions or trillions of dollars in revenue. So that's how they, sometimes define it. But if you kind of like scope out of a more like legal contractual term, the way people view AGI is essentially AI that can do human level of thinking, but better. So all the things that you and I can do right now, even like kind of like that consciousness level of like deciding, is this respectful? Is this humanistic? Is this empathetic? All that deeper level of thinking that we can do, this AGI is supposed to do it the same and if not better. So people think that once AGI is a reality, and some people think that it will happen in the next, year, next couple of years or 5, 10 years. People kind of have varying opinions, but supposedly it would actually shoot humanity into the future, hundreds of, years into the future in just a matter of like years. So I think that's something that is very scary, but also very exciting because we just don't know which direction it might go.
Amazing. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go there, but I do think it's important if you referenced it just so that everybody sees it and understands it and can kind of look out for those conversations moving forward because it's a fascinating piece of the equation that I
Very
think
much
will
so.
be in more and more conversations in the both the immediate and the long-term future. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this in this topic before we switch gears a little bit?
No, just I think that AI is giving humans too much credit if they think they can think 5 steps ahead of us, because most of the people in my life can't think 2 steps ahead of themselves. So the goal here, guys, if computers get that good, is to be unpredictable. Keep them on their feet. So
Very true.
Well said. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to pick up on a topic that we discussed on this webinar series back in November. Gilad, you led a session, I just figured out how it was 5 months ago, about answer engine optimization. And just for those people in our audience that maybe weren't here, what we really talked about, we kind of framed this complete disruption of search engine optimization as we know it. Um, Unlike my friend Jason, I was around when Google started, and I saw the immediate disruption that it had, and I watched companies literally run and spend a fortune, both in terms of time and resources, in doing everything humanly possible on the technical side and on the content side to rise to the top of search. And now, literally, almost, I don't want to say overnight, but over a short span of time, that is being disrupted. And Gilad gave a really good presentation on that. If any of you would like a copy of that, I will gladly send it to you. Just reach out to me. But in the immediate term, Gilad, can you talk about where LLM or AEO optimization has gone since we last talked and what you see happening there right now? And how important is it for marketers to jump on board here?
Yeah. There are so many changes here about AEO. Almost happen on a weekly basis at this point with Claude and ChatGPT 5.5, and like coming up with lots of different models and lots of different things about how marketeers trying to reverse engineer the algorithm and how to get ranked basically really highly on ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, what have you, Grok, and basically what we're saying is that the demand for marketing teams that actually know how to focus on that is skyrocketing. Like we've never seen so much demand for companies that all want to be number one on ChatGPT. How do I do that? How do I get that on Claude? Oh, I see that all of the development and all of the B2B companies are actually going on now after Claude. Claude is my end game of how do I get there on the top results. And when you're looking on the shifts on how those trust signals are being built, each and every algorithm is working differently. So Reddit used to be very, very prominent how they were scanned to actually get good results. Now LinkedIn is surpassing them on many of those things. And like you see a lot of those changes. Obviously, Wikipedia is always like a trusted source. Your website is always the core about how you are communicating, who you are, what you do, how you actually convert users and explain what it is that you do better than anyone else. So frequently asked questions and schema and lots of the technical things that are boring but are super important for those robots that are scanning through your website and in the split of a second need to understand, will I recommend him or will I recommend his biggest competitor? Who is better for that answer? So I feel like the competition is becoming harder. I think that a lot of the algorithm changes that are happening with every single new model makes everything move for you. Just like any time that you're thinking about the App Store just changed from iOS 24, 25, or 17 to 18 and things like nature. And then, hey, I used to rank there really well. Now I'm not. How do I actually reverse that? And now you have so many different models that you need to fight over. And hey, I managed to do a massive leap on Perplexity, but I took a hit on ChatGPT. And ChatGPT basically is still the number one source of traffic from those LLMs. It used to be that number two was Gemini. Now I'm seeing more on most of the sites that we are working on with our clients, seeing Claude basically generating more of the traffic just because, again, the adoption that Claude sees in the market. And AIO of how you're actually getting ranked on zero responses on Google is another gives you different results than Gemini. So I feel like there are so many things that are moving, and at the end of the day, the trust signals is the thing that it changes which signals they are, but the trust is like the main thing. So it's not just your website anymore. It's what you're doing on your website, what you're doing on your LinkedIn, what you're doing on Instagram, what you're doing on Reddit, what you're doing on Wikipedia, your public domain reviews or reviews that you have in general. If it's an app, so in the App Store, if it's like a service company, it's on G2, for example, or any review sites. If you're seeing reviews on Amazon on a specific product to recommend or not recommend it, like the AI basically tests the entire presence online. It's not just your site. It's every single piece of all of those elements. Every single time that we are getting another article on Forbes, you see a spike, like you see a meaningful spike. Every podcast interview that you're doing on the bigger, let's say the top 10 podcasts, you're seeing another spike on everything that was there was transcribed and basically was fed to all of those LLMs. Every single time that you are launching a new video on YouTube, for example, launching like 4 or 5 videos every single time on YouTube, and then seeing the impact of that on Gemini and AIO is something that you're seeing like in a matter of usually a week. So there are lots of those growth levers that how the entire brand is being perceived by all of those sources is super meaningful, and it changes by the week. And we are looking on we have like a chart trends on every single one of the models, and then every single time reverse engineer, okay, now they changed something in the calibration, and this is more important than that. And now, how do actually, who won because of that, who lost because of that, and now what are the new best practices to reshuffle to get you better on the right track? So it's fascinating and it's super fast moving. And I think that this is something that is definitely like the fight of the future. You see brands that didn't invest a lot in SEO, but on the AEO side of things, they're skyrocketing and actually showing dust to their competitors, while a lot of others still investing in SEO and still writing the 10, 15 blog posts every month and not seeing any movement, while others actually expanding on podcasting and PR and like lots of other things that are building them the trust and making so much waves, while the others are just stagnant. So I feel like the strategies and the best practices are changing at a very rapid pace.
You're muted.
Mike,
You're muted. Mike, you're muted. Yeah. Okay.
Did not want my dog to participate in this, but yeah, no, it's amazing to me. And I mean, I have friends that have literally invested literally decades in SEO, and only to see the playing field being leveled. So I suppose you can look at it in a couple of capacities. It's a great thing for new product innovators and for brands that have been playing catch up to the people that started early. But by the same token, I think you would concur that the mindset, the marketeer mindset has to change right now when you're looking at optimization in general, or answers. When people are searching for answers, it's a completely different mindset starting now.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and
think.
the answer is so much more specific. Yeah, sorry, but Jason.
Oh no, no, I was just gonna say to Gilad's point, I think I believe there's a tool, like a platform that recently hit unicorn status at $1 billion. And that tool actually does, I forget what the company is called, but it exactly does what, Gilad, talked about in terms of AEO, kind of like scans, all the AI tools to make sure that you're ranking on these LLMs. Also, like, what is the ROI that you're seeing, with by getting these LLMs to kind of bring up your business. And I believe that business like went live maybe like less than 2 years ago, and they already hit $1 billion. So to Gilad's point, I think maybe eventually we'll even see a world where AEO kind of overtakes SEO, and kind of being like the main engine driver. So it is very interesting to see like where this is going to go, how efficient, how much is going to really impact the way the consumers think and behave.
But consensus, one last point on this, and then I want to ask a final question. Gilad, you would not recommend for people that are still doing SEO. It's not a function of dropping it, right? Like there still is inherent value there, even though we know that there's a tremendous amount of answers that are currently being, answered by Gemini on Google and through it. But it's still it needs to be a hybrid strategy at present, correct?
Yeah, again, there is no doubt about it. At the end of the day, even we see lots of the traffic that starts to come in from LLMs, Google is still probably the biggest driver of traffic to any place right now. So I would definitely not neglect it. But the best practices there are different. And once you actually give someone an answer for a very, very specific question, it's not just going after a keyword or a phrase. It's like, I have a very long question, and that very long question, who is the best to fit to that specific sub-segment of the market? If I'm asking now a very basic question, I will get a very basic answer. But if I'm asking a very specific one, I now moved to a new office, and within that office, I connected my laptop into a Sonos soundbar with 5.1 channels. And I needed something to split the sound from this, and it recommended me the specific device that I need to buy on Amazon that will come the fastest way. And it's exactly to that point. If I would ask any other, not that technical question, I will get a very different type of recommendation for, buy this hub that can actually connect to all of the different devices. But it won't going to necessarily fit to my specific needs. So I feel like the fact that you are asking a very, very specific pain point, I'm marketing a mobile app in the subscription, and I have a subscription model in the healthcare space. Who will be the best marketeer there, or who will be the right tool to use for attribution? It's going to be a different answer than, the best attribution going to be whatever. Like it's different. So I feel like the more that you are customizing the level of answers, and you'll be able to be more the best solution for the specific problem, AI will be able to kind of dictate who is the best for every single one of those niches, and you'll be able to win much more. And still, no matter what you do, the biggest driver will still be probably Google and then Bing and probably then the other LLMs. At this point, people are still coming to website. People want to see that themselves and not just getting the answer. That they trust it. Oh, okay, so these are the two best companies. Now I'm going to go to their website. Now I'm going to see who they are. I see if I trust them. And obviously I'm coming much more advocate to those specific recommendations because I got a recommendation. It's not just that I found it by mistake, but I will still inspect it myself. I will still decide if I want to reach out or not, if I want to buy or not. So I think that you cannot neglect SEO, but I think that AEO has a much bigger potential when you're looking for 2 years ahead. I think that zero clicks will become much more dominant. Like you'll have much less people that are searching on the regular platform, so to speak. You see that Google even changed their own interface for the first time after so many years that it used to be just like, what do you want to do? And now, hey, you know what? You have like all of the additional AI buttons and all of those things because they see that this is how users actually start behaving differently on the search trends.
I think, listening to you talk about this, to me, if you have a product, people are going to do product research on LLMs for sure, right? And I think that if that's a product that is a physical product, especially if it's a high-end product, people are going to research and compare Audi versus Mercedes versus, they're going to do those type of things, right? For me and for us, I think what it means is that we believe that if we continue a distributed media strategy, so a little bit of CTV, a little bit of podcasting, some PR, right? So that again, that combined arms offensive, that we will get picked up and indexed. For right now, rather than saying, okay, we're going to take a chunk of budget, we're going to dedicate it to AEO, something like that. For us, we've got decent global brand recognition, but and we have, we're somewhat unique and differentiated, back to that word. But I do think that if we are leveraging, and you guys provide some of these services for us, right? The App Store optimization and performance marketing and connected TV and PR, that at least it's going to elevate our chances. Like you say, if I get quoted in Forbes, then we're going to spike, right? And that's what we're counting on right now until the dust kind of settles and we determine how do you really keep track of all the changing models that are out there. I think that's really difficult.
Agree. All right. Want to ask one final question, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions from the audience. Again, please feel free. I have one question that I received via email. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. But one final question, short answer here. I'll start with you, Clayton. But I would love to have everybody answer this question. If you were advising a marketing leader today, what's one bold bet you'd make about the future, and where would you be cautious?
The one bold bet that I would make would probably be, and I'm not going to have a good answer for you, Mike, because I want to say don't neglect things like digital out of home and connected TV.
Okay.
The bold bet is to diversify what you're doing because nobody has a good answer right now. Things are moving so fast and there's so much competitive intelligence that I would just, stick with a diversified strategy and don't neglect, some of the options that maybe you're not trying right now.
As crazy as that sounds, I do think that's bold. No, that's great. Appreciate it. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, given that I work in the AI space, what I've seen is that if I had to have a bold bet, is that I have a bold bet on personalized intent-based growth journeys. So I think helping, not only, I think a lot of the reasons why, AI companies are not understanding their users well is, it's the feedback loop, right? So it's genuinely understanding what our cohort of users want and teaching them and educating them how they can actually use it to better their lives. I think that's what, I'm going to have my bold bet on, that, we are going to kind of move towards more personalized intent-based user growth journeys.
Gilad?
Yeah, I think that like our kind of boldest bet, it was around a year ago that we started with that, but we have in the investment in AI, I feel like productizing so many different things. Like we started as an agency, now we are kind of a bit more of a technology company where we have 11 different products that we are developing at the same time, working on reworking every single workflow in the company. So we have 21 people that are working on recreating every single process that we used to do. We saw what are the results that are working better, but how do we get there in a faster and a more efficient way and a better way? A lot of times, when you're thinking about competitive analysis and seeing what your biggest competitors are doing, you're doing it once a quarter. It's a lot of time. You're downloading all of their ads, seeing what are the specific things, what they work for them, what doesn't work for them, analyzing every single one of those assets, what are the call to actions, what are like lots of those things. Now you can do that within a product that you can build within Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork, for example, making this type of a live dashboard. And every single day you're getting the gist of, hey, those are the 3 things that your biggest competitors have just tested this morning. And like there are so many things that if you're building new systems around things that used to be tedious, used to be so much time of analyzing and getting, and now you can build basically your own ecosystem around what are the things that are going to be helping you to make better decisions. And I think that the bold investment that we made was basically investing a lot on a big AI team, a VP AI, 6 AI directors, and then 16 AI champions within the company that are rebuilding and reshuffling every single one of the workflows to get you to a place where if someone is creating the company of mine in 2026 will probably build it very differently than how I built it in 2013. And they will rewire everything in a very different way. And I need to be to know how I can actually beat them with the same level of what I have today. And our workflows are different, obviously. So the amount of data that I have is much better than what they have, but I'm much more legacy because the business is older. So I feel like the bet on AI and building and testing all of those tools and testing every single one of those elements and seeing what works for creative production, what works for media buying, what works for reporting, what works for the BI, what works for every single part of your organic side. How do I create posts in a more efficient way, but based on the feedback loop of what worked best in the past 3 weeks on Instagram compared to what worked best on Facebook, compared to what works best on LinkedIn. Like it's a different platform, different vibes, different things. So I feel like the bet on like investing heavily on AI is something that I feel like is probably the strongest bet that we made. It hurt our EBITDA last year significantly, but it made me now have an 80% growth margin just because I had so many new things that I can show to the market that are completely done differently than what we had before. So I feel like that's probably the biggest bet that's going to be paying the best dividends, but it can also be very frustrating. A lot of times you're hitting a wall. A lot of times it gets you dumb assets and hallucinations. You're saying, how the hell does that happen? And then, okay, we need to put a guardrail in here and here and here and here and over there. And then, okay, now it makes sense. Now it feels like you're coming as a chef. You keep on tasting different things that the AI cooked for you, and then now this is too salty. Now that's not. But now, oh my God, this is really good, and now I can actually replicate it and bring it to life so much faster. So I think that's probably the best bet that I would recommend today on that side.
Jason loved the chef analogy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before I forget, I just want to thank the 3 of you very much. This was awesome. Incredibly educational for me, and I certainly hope it was for our panel people that participated today. And thanks to all of you for coming. I do have one question that came in, so before we leave, we can answer it, and I'm going to read it to you here. I haven't had a chance to really peruse it, but question for all. Is there a fear that AI's reputation has been, oh, this is interesting, irreparably damaged? It feels like brands have used it in its beta phase along with the energy consumption pushbacks. It may be here to stay, but was the public this hostile to the World Wide Web? So I guess the question in broader strokes is, has AI kind of burned a bridge in
No.
coming on too strong?
No, the market is incredibly resilient, right? Do you remember when MP3s first came out? It was like, oh my gosh, it's going to kill CDs and vinyl, and oh, nobody's going to want to do this. And the market evolves with the technology, and they can have a visceral reaction at first, but the market's very resilient, so it's not over for AI by any stretch. There are some reputational concerns. There are some ethical concerns, right? And those we're going to all have to face those. But it's going to be an inexorable march to AGI. We know that.
Yeah, to Clayton's point, completely agree with Clayton. I think it's the whole concept of you adapt or you get left behind, right? So I think, people are definitely expecting AI to do quite a lot, even though it can't do as much as what people want right now. But, to Clayton's point, I think people will adapt, people will learn. I think once AI does have that breakthrough where, we find this universal use case for every consumer in the world. Because I know right now, I think AI, or at least LLM adoption rate, is still very, very, very little bit. I think given that we're in this industry, we kind of think that everyone is using it. But when you actually scope out and look at the entire world. I think Claude recently released some kind of research, or Anthropic did, saying how something like less than a percent or like less than a couple percent of the world uses, AI. So I think we're still very in the early adopting stages, but once we are able to have a better, once able to assimilate AI into our everyday lives, I think that's when, things will change. So I definitely don't think that we are seeing AI burnout right now.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you all very much.